want to begin by giving God praise and God glory for the opportunity that we have here. We're so thankful for this congregation and the opportunity that it's given me and my wife, Laurie, to share in a few days of fellowship with you, and we look forward to being encouraged and being refreshed by our activities together, and appreciate the confidence to be able to come over and to share a few studies with you from God's Word, and pray that our time will be enlightening to you, cause you to think about yourself, think about your relationship with the Lord, think about your relationship with each other. It's been a while since we've been here, and it's good to see some faces we're familiar with. Some kids have grown up, and to see some new faces, and look forward to engaging with you and being able to fellowship with you. I'm here these next few days working under the oversight of the elders here to help accomplish their purpose and their vision for this meeting. And so I want to say that and appreciate again their efforts and their leadership here at this congregation. This evening, for a little while, I want us to begin with the subject of listening to each other. And this is whenever we cue all the wives up to give the elbow to the husband, because stereotypical men don't like to listen very well, and women are all about conversation and talking and expressing their feelings and things like that. And as men, sometimes we're resistant to that. But we want to talk about something, even though that is a real issue, we want to talk about something maybe a little more profound and a little more on a serious note. One of the things that was prayed in our prayer this evening, and I appreciate the prayer very much, about how that we all have struggles, and it was in the prayer that our brother prayed that we will turn to each other for support, that we will turn to each other for help. And so this evening we want to talk a little bit about trying to create a culture where we would do that. You know, we talk about turning to each other and bearing one another's burdens and supporting one another, but do we really feel that we exist in a culture where it's safe to do that? It's very risky to open yourself up. It's very risky to confess faults and confess sins to people, to let other people into your life and into your heart to understand the things that you need. And sometimes we're unwilling to take that risk, and we would rather dwell with the loneliness of the burden of our problems than to open up and to share with other people. And one of the reasons that I think that we feel that way is just that we're not confident turning to each other. One of the things that really pains my heart in talking to people who are members of the church and you know, in groups of people that have people that are knowledgeable and people that are well versed in scriptures, and then they will say something like, "I just don't have anyone to talk to." And I'm like, "Really? You don't have anyone to talk to?" Well, it's not that they don't have anyone to talk to. They have a lot of people that they can talk to, but they don't have the confidence to talk to people. And there's various reasons for that. I mean, some people don't want to talk to other people about their problems because they know they'll tell them the truth, and they don't want to hear the truth. I get that. But there really are people who dwell in loneliness with their struggles and with their problems simply because they don't feel comfortable in opening up and expressing the things that are on their heart, to seek the counsel and to seek the comfort that is among the body of Christ. And that's why we're talking this evening about listening to each other. Before we get to the listening part of the lesson, we first of all want to understand, why is it important for us to listen? Well, what we want to try to do is to develop that culture where people feel comfortable, where they can turn to other people and they can share the dark secrets of their life. I'm a retired school counselor. Now, some people would say, "Well, you're not a real counselor if you're a school counselor." And anymore, it's getting that way, you know, and had some training, you know, in counseling and things like that. So if I come off with some counsel-y stuff, that's where that's coming from. And it is really important that we create a culture where people feel like that they can open up. And how do we create that culture? And so we're going to look at some scriptures tonight that first of all show us the importance of creating that culture, that we're commanded to create that culture. That we can develop among ourselves a relationship among each member, a relationship that just transcends the superficial, but goes to the very depth of your soul and my soul, where we truly are, as the Apostle Paul said, members one of another. That we're not just members that are just side by side and stuck together, but we truly are members one of another. And again, that's that can be an uncomfortable relationship to be called to. If you're someone who is more introverted, you're someone that, you like your own space and you like being by yourself. But we also need to understand that if the wisdom of God calls for that, we have to understand that that is a need that we have and do all that we can to create the culture and become the type of person that we need to be in order to reach out to people, but also to be that type of person that people would reach out to. There is a great need for comforters in the church. Brother David and I were talking a little bit right before we left, and he's making the statement that it just seems like he's entering into a role that he hasn't normally done. That he's an evangelist, he's a Bible teacher, and seems like now called for more counseling things. And I don't know about the elders here, but I know back home a lot of my work is just that. It is counseling. It's having people coming with their problems and their difficulties and finding myself in a situation that it's not just, a Bible study, but it is a counseling session more like. And I think that we're going to experience that more and more because whenever we look at the situation that the world is in with the breakdown of the home and the breakdown of the fundamental institutions that are there that are supposed to give people a good foundation upon which to build a life on, it's just not there anymore. The stability of a family and the certainty in life that people need to have, it's not there. And so people that come in from the outside, they come in with issues. And those of us that are church members who have grown up in the church all of our life and we were all taught the right thing and we were told how to behave and everything, I'm finding out that as my generation has grown up, that we've grown up with a lot of issues. We just thought we had it together, only to realize the truth whenever we had to face life in the real world. And so I think that it's necessary that we create, again, I'm using the word culture a lot, a place where hurting people can come and feel comfortable opening up to other people. The Bible gives us some instances in the Bible of men who were in situations that needed comforting and they felt like they were failed. In Psalm 69 and verse 20, David laments his condition and he says, "Reproach has broken my heart and I'm full of heaviness. And I looked for someone to take pity, but there was none. And for comforters, but I found none." And we're all familiar with Job. And Job's three friends, his three counselors, whenever they came to make him better, Job answered and said, "I've heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. Shall words of wind have an end? Or what provokes you that you answer? I could speak as you do. If your soul was in my place, I could heap up words against you and shake my head at you. But I would strengthen you with my mouth, and the comfort of my lips would relieve your grief." And so many times I fear that as comforters in the church, that a lot of times that's what we speak, are words of wind that never really address the deep hurts and pains that people are experiencing. Well, you just need to pray about it. You just need to study your Bible more. You just need to go to church more. And those are all good things. And I'm not diminishing the importance of that counsel and that wisdom. But to just speak that to someone and then turn and walk away and leave them with that, we haven't helped them any. We haven't given them any comfort. And in fact, we could exacerbate their situation because those are probably things they already know, but because of their circumstance, they need someone to help them do that. And so whenever we see people who are hurting and whenever we encounter people, we need to be equipped, not to just give them trite little phrases. Well, you just need to trust in the Lord more. That's true. They do need to trust in the Lord more. How are they going to do that? You know what they're going to tell you? I want to trust in the Lord more. How am I going to do that? Or are we going to be just like, depart, be ye warmed and filled, and not give them the things that they need? And a lot of that stems from a lack of what we're going to talk about tonight, empathy, true connectedness with people in their struggles. You see, we're called to be burden bearers. Galatians chapter 6, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Understand, that is the fulfillment of the law of Christ when we bear one another's burdens. And if we don't have a place, if we don't have a culture where we are free to exchange burdens, how are we going to be able to bear burdens? The importance of empathy in Christian relationships. Again, please don't sit there and think, oh, here's some of this counseling talk, some of these sissy soft skills that I hear so much about. You know, we're real people here. We live in the real world, you know. There's a popular social commentator that likes to say, you know, facts don't care about your feelings. And that's true. Facts don't care about your feelings. Your feelings have no impact on what the facts are. But you know who cares about your feelings? You do. And because you do, I need to. And because you do, everybody else in here needs to. Feelings are a powerful aspect of who we are as God has created us. We can't truly and fully experience fellowship with God without the emotions and feelings that He created us with. That those were given to us as tools by God to know Him more and to experience Him more, but because of the fall, our feelings have become corrupted. And we find ourselves in situations where it seems like we live in two different worlds. There's the world that's real, and then there's the world that my feelings tell me about. And so our feelings get distorted and our feelings get warped. And the popular philosophy today is, well, let's just adjust the real world to conform to your feelings. And I find that very strange. That people would think, hey, it's easier to change the world than it is to change your feelings. That is the power of feelings. And we have to respect that power. And I think that the Bible tells us very clearly that we are to respect the power and the importance of feelings in the lives of everyone. Peter says in 1 Peter 3, 8 and 9, finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. How many times have you heard that word or read that word, compassion? And then we zip right along. Love his brother, be tenderhearted, courteous, not returning evil for evil, reviling for reviling, so forth. Sometimes, I don't know, it may just be my experience. I may be telling on myself. You see some of those words like that and okay, compassion, I got it. Let's, what's next? But we're going to stop for just a moment and think about that word compassion. Because it's a word that carries with it, I think, a much deeper meaning than what you and I realize. Whenever we look at the word compassion, it comes from the Greek word that we have up there, and it means to have a fellow feeling, suffering or feeling the like with another. And the distinction that we want to make is that this compassion is not a feeling for someone, but it is actually feeling with someone. And there's a big difference. I might look at you and I might have a feeling for what you're experiencing and what you're going through. But what Peter, through the inspiration of the Spirit, is calling us all to is not just to have a feeling for one another, but to have a feeling with one another. We hear it today as sympathy and empathy. And it's kind of confusing because the word that we're looking at comes from a Greek word that looks a lot like sympathy, but really in modern day English, it's more akin to our word empathy. Sympathy, again, is feelings of pity and sorrow for someone else's misfortune. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. To understand and share the feelings of another. If something was to happen to, somebody else's child, and I look upon that and just really feel for the pain and the sadness that they're going through. and then look at something that happens to my child, the experience is going to be completely different. I'm going to have a feeling for them, but the feeling that I'm going to have is a completely different feeling. When empathy would be the feeling that I would have for my own child, and it would be the feeling that I would have for those parents going through what they're going through. The grief, the pain, the agony, and the sorrow. Not just a feeling for, but a feeling with. That's some pretty heady stuff. It's a level of relationship and a level of involvement in each other that, again, we've been called to that we may not be real comfortable with. Matthew 14 and verse 14, a word that we see associated with Jesus a lot is compassion. And what I want to offer to you in this is Jesus, in these words where you see compassion, it wasn't compassion in empathy, but it was a compassion where he had a pity or a sorrow for. That the compassion that we see in Jesus in these occasions is not the type of compassion that we're called to. Let's look at it. Jesus, before he fed the 5,000, he looked out on the people. And he saw a great multitude, and he was moved with compassion for them, and he healed their sick. So here's Jesus. He's encountered this group of people. He doesn't really know this group of people. These people are following after him because of their interest in him. But whenever he sees them, he has compassion on them. In Luke 7 and verse number 13, when the widow of Nain, he saw the widow of Nain and they were carrying her dead son, it says that the Lord saw her and he had compassion on her and said to her, "Do not weep." The word for compassion here comes from this Greek word, which simply means to have the bowels yearn or to feel sympathy. So whenever Jesus saw the 5,000, he didn't really experience what they were feeling, but he had sympathy on them. And so he healed them and he fed them. And whenever Jesus saw the widow, he didn't really feel what she was feeling, but he saw what she was going through and had sympathy, and he was moved to resurrect. And so whenever we look at this is important because we're going to see another instance in the Scripture where Jesus is compassionate, but it's a completely different type of compassion. This type of compassion is useful. This type of compassion is the compassion that we have whenever we see someone having misfortune. We reach out to them to help them. There is utility in this compassion, obviously, because it's what Jesus had. But you know what? When it comes to you and to me, this isn't the compassion that Jesus has. Jesus has a different compassion. In Romans 12 and verse 15, we're talking about a compassion that rejoices with those that rejoice and weep with those that weep. When was the last time you just sat with somebody and wept with them? You just cried with them. Are you comfortable crying with someone? Let me ask you this. Are you comfortable being in the presence of someone who cries? Whenever somebody starts to cry, what's your first reaction? Oh, I've got to do something to cheer them up. I've got to do something to stop this, because we think, well, crying's not good. Crying is a good thing. Crying is a good thing. Crying is an expression of a human emotion that gives us an experience that, if it's used correctly, can draw us closer to one another and draw us closer to God. There's a proverb that talks about singing a merry heart or a merry song to a broken heart. That's like giving them vinegar to drink and taking away their garment in the cold weather. And we think whenever people are crying, we've got to cheer them up. No, weep with them. Hurt with them. Cry with them. And that experience creates a depth of relationship that God can take and God can use to bless with. 1 Corinthians 12:26, and if one suffers, all members suffer with it. Or if one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. If a member suffers, all the members suffer with it. This is the empathy that we're talking about. This isn't feeling for someone, this is feeling with someone. And the Greek word here means to experience pain jointly or of the same kind. You got to want to do this. You got to want to do this. You got to want to invest in people and invest in people's lives. to be able to feel pain like they feel. And that's what God has called us to as a group of believers. Amen. Look around this building. Look at every face in this building. God wants you to feel not sorry for one another. He wants you to feel with one another. In pain, in suffering, in sorrow, in times of rejoicing. To have that type of relationship with each other. Because it's only in that type of relationship are we going to find the comfort and the help that we need to bear our burdens and to be able to endure the struggles that life brings to us. In Hebrews 10, verse 34, the author of Hebrews is writing to the Christians there, and he says, "You had compassion on me in my chains, and joyfully accepted the plundering of your goods, knowing that you have a better and enduring possession for yourselves in heaven." This word compassion that's used here is the word that means to feel with. Notice what he says in chapter 13, verse 3. "Remember the prisoners as if chained with them." In chapter 10:34, he said, "You had compassion on me in my chains." And that compassion is the feeling as if they were in chains themselves. It wasn't a standing back and looking from a distance and saying, "Oh man, I hate that for him." But rather it was an involving themselves in their own soul in the experience of what it would be like to be in those chains. Jesus, as an example of empathy. In the raising of Lazarus from the grave, when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, he fell down at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died." Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled, and he said, "Where have you laid him?" And they said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept, and the Jews said, "See how he loved him." And so Jesus is going in, and he's going to the tomb, and he sees Mary, and Mary's weeping. And then he looks around at all of these other people with Mary, and then sees that they're weeping. And what does he do? "Guys, why are you weeping? I'm here. I can take care of this. There's no need to weep. You think he's dead. He's really just asleep. Because I've got the power to resurrect him." Why didn't he do that? It would have made everybody stop crying, wouldn't it? But Jesus, on this occasion, in this relationship, wept along with them. Why did he do that? Why did he do that? Well, the Jews saw that and said they saw how he loved him. You know, Jesus could have put on a great display of his miraculous power and told them to quit crying and raise Lazarus and demonstrated his power. But in this instance, he wants to demonstrate his care and his compassion for them in their misery that they're going through. And to manifest and to show his love for them. And that's what we're called to do also. This is a different type of compassion that he had on the widow of Nain. Notice what he said to the widow of Nain. Whenever she was crying, he said, "Don't weep." Well, why did he tell her not to weep? But then up here, when everybody's weeping, he weeps. It's a different relationship. It's a different relationship. He knew Lazarus. He knew Mary. He knew Martha. He was involved with them. And because of the deeper relationship that he had, he entered into their heartbreak. He entered into their grief. And he shared that grief with them, whereas the compassion that he has on the widow was a compassion that he saw the sadness and he was moved within him to do something for her. But Jesus wept. And Jesus is our model for empathy. So how can we have that type of relationship among us? Well, let's look at how Jesus did it. In Hebrews 4, verses 14 through 16, seeing then that we have a great high priest who's passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. The word sympathize that's used there comes from, again, the word that we've been talking about, having fellow feeling, suffering, or feeling the like with one another. That Jesus just doesn't feel sorry for us. That Jesus enters in to feel and understand the misery and the burdens and the heartaches that we bear. Well, how do we know that? How do we know that? Because he was in all points tempted like as we are. Jesus came to the earth where we are. Jesus clothed himself in flesh like we were clothed. Are clothed. He walked in this world and lived as we do. He came and he shared in our experience in order to give us confidence then that whenever we need help, we can go boldly to him. We can go boldly. The word boldly there means to speak with frankness and openness. In other words, we go to God, or we go to Jesus boldly with frankness and openness about the burdens and struggles that we have, because we know he will empathize with us. And it's whenever we create that culture among ourselves that we're going to be comfortable going to one another with the same boldness, opening ourselves up to one another and revealing to one another our struggles and our heartaches to get the support and the help that we need. He came into our experience. He came into our experience. And that gives us confidence. As we sang tonight, and I appreciate Jonathan leading the song, my Jesus knows just what I need. Well, what gives us the confidence that he knows what we need? Because he's lived our experience. In Hebrews chapter 2, verses 17 and 18. Therefore, in all things he had to be made like his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. For in that he himself has suffered, being tempted, he's able to aid those who are tempted. You have confidence in Jesus? You have confidence that Jesus knows just how you feel? That he knows every heartache, that he knows every tear that you cry, that he understands your loneliness? How can you have confidence in that? Because he came into our experience and lived that. He understands. And we use Jesus as the example in order for us to have the deep relationships that we need, where we have a culture where we can share with one another the burdens that we carry and the sins that we struggle with. We have to have that type of relationship among ourselves. So what's the key to empathetic relationships? Now we're finally getting to the listening part. I can't live your life. You can't live my life. You know, we can share some common experiences, and I can kind of have a general idea as to maybe some things that you're going through, because they might be similar to something that I'm going through. But to really know you, and to really know you at the level that's necessary to give you confidence that I can help you, I'm going to have to do something. I'm going to have to listen. You know, the Apostle Paul, he made the statement, who knows the mind of a man except the spirit of a man? I don't know you, and the only way that I can know you and know your experience and know what you're going through is to listen. Whenever you think of all of the forms of communication that we involve ourselves in, listening, I'm going to say, is the most important one. It's not the one where we're sending out the message, it's the one where we're taking in the message. Because how well we take in the message is going to determine the effectiveness of the messages that go out from us. And if I'm going to be a sufficient comforter for you or a sufficient comforter for anyone, I have to be able to listen in a way that's going to bring about a connectedness with your experience that's going to help me to understand what you need and to give you confidence that I know what you need. Let me use this as an example. Let's say you go to the doctor and you've got a headache. And you go in and you tell the doctor, "Doctor, I've got a headache." The doctor's going to say, "Well, headaches are bad. I wish you didn't have a headache. Here, take this." And he sends you on your way. How much confidence are you going to have in that? But if you go in and you say, "Doctor, I've got a headache," and you say, "Okay, tell me about your headache. What's it feel like? Where's it hurting? Are there certain times of day that this happens? Tell me about your diet. Tell me about, do you exercise? Let me know so that I can understand." And then you go through that discussion and he writes you out and gives it to you. Now what do you feel like? How many times have you heard people complain? "I went to the doctor and they didn't ask any questions or do anything. It just kind of like to move me along." My point is that in order to have confidence in a helper, you have to be confident that the helper understands. And whenever we're called into helping relationships with each other, if I'm going to help you or you're going to help me, we have to have confidence in each other that we're going to understand each other. And the only way that we can do that is through listening to each other. Listening. There's several different types of listening. There's active listening, there's critical listening, there's, informational listening. But we're going to talk a little bit, just briefly, about what's called empathetic listening. It's a type of listening that accomplishes the goal that we need in helping relationships. Empathetic listening is the practice of giving someone your full attention, both intellectually and emotionally, to understand their perspective and feelings. The goal of empathetic listening is for the speaker to feel heard and understood and to enhance your relationship with them. I talk a lot about, I talk to people in instances and talking to young people, and one of the things that you'll hear often is that nobody understands. No one understands. People want to be understood. Now again, their experience, right or wrong. Okay? Forget that for just a moment. That's important, but for right now, people just want to be understood. If a guy came to me and said, "I lost my job, I don't have any income, I can't pay any bills, don't have any groceries in the house, my children are starving, and I just had to do something, so I went down to the store and I robbed some groceries." Okay? So how do we respond to that? Stealing's wrong. Do I need to do that? Or do I need to maybe look at that and listen to that and put myself in that place and think, you know what? I can understand that. I can understand that situation and the difficulty that you may have been in at that time. And I can understand that. Well, we need to understand, using the word understand a lot, understanding is not an endorsement of sinful actions. You can say you understand to people in the things that they've gone through and they're experiencing. You're not endorsing their actions. You're just simply trying to connect and say to them, I can see that. I can see that. And again, that's not an endorsement of the action. But what it says to the person you're trying to help is that I'm interested in understanding you before I speak to you. So that you can have confidence that whenever I speak from a place of understanding. Because if you tell somebody something and you give them instruction and they don't think that you understand their situation, what you tell them is not going to mean anything to them. They're just going to walk away and say, well, they don't understand. But if you take the time to understand, then the counsel, then the comfort, then the wisdom that you seek to impart carries weight and credibility to the one that's asking for it. Again, whenever we consider Jesus, whenever he came into our experience, he came here to understand. He understands what it's like to be like us. The Bible tells us that as a father pitieth his child in the book of Psalms, so the Lord pities us. He knows our frame. He knows we're dust. He knows all the struggles and the difficulties and the pains that we go through. Does he endorse all of those things? Absolutely not. But does he understand? Yes. And because we know he understands, we have confidence in him as a comforter. We're trying to enhance our relationship. In Amos 3 and verse number 3, Amos made a statement, can two walk together unless they are agreed? Now, he makes this in the context when the prophets were speaking of the judgment that was going to come upon God's people, and he was assuring them that God and the prophets were together on this. So when you hear the prophets saying that there's judgment coming, you better know that there's judgment coming. And so to express that, he used several figurative analogies, I guess you could say. And the first one that he uses is, can two walk together unless they are agreed? Now, in this statement, when it says unless they are agreed, the word agreed there doesn't mean they think the same thing. The word agreed actually means to come together at an appointed time or place. And if you're going to help someone, or I'm going to help someone, the first thing that we have to do with them is come together. We've got to come together. And the way you come together is through listening. Listening to their experience and becoming empathetic towards them so that you know what they're going through and they know that you know what they're going through, so then you can begin to walk together to lead that soul to the truth that they need to know to bring healing for the burdens that they're bearing. But if you don't ever come together, you can't walk together. And I think that this picture is real important of a helping relationship. You must meet people where they are to help people get to where they need to be. I had a guy tell me years ago, a man I respect highly, and he said, you have to meet people where they are. And so many times we want to stand back and we want to call for them to come to us, and we're hesitant to walk into what they're in. What did Jesus do? Did he call us to him or did he come to us? What did Jesus do? Did he call us to his experience or did he come to our experience? We have to understand that people need to be heard. People need to know that they're understood. So, how do we listen empathetically? These are we're going to look at about 5 things for you to think about as you're thinking about listening to other people. Practice these with your spouse. It's great. It goes great. First thing you got to do, whenever you're listening empathetically, you've got to keep the goal in mind. You've got to understand the other person and their experience. When somebody brings a burden to you, you don't have to solve their problems in one setting. You can visit more than once. Sometimes, oh no, somebody's bringing me a problem. I've got to give them the right answer. I've got to fix them. No, you don't. Just listen. It's easy. It takes a lot of pressure off. Whenever people want to come to you and talk about their problems, just listen. And just simply try to understand the person and their experience. Let them do the talking. Let them do the talking. And just let them say what they need to say without any judgment or interruption. And what I mean by judgment, not to say that there's not right or wrong, but to take what they're saying, whatever it might be, and be able to put it together to understand how they're feeling. And sometimes people will say some pretty extreme things to you in the throes of hurt. I have heard, God doesn't love me. God doesn't care for me. I get so mad at God. I wish I could just kill myself. How do you respond to those things? You just listen and understand where those things, that hurt is coming from. Because really, all feelings are, expressions of feelings are manifestations of what's going on in the mind. So if somebody tells me, God doesn't care for me and God doesn't love me, that tells me there's some things that they don't know and understand. And so rather than just challenging them right then, I know that that's something we're going to have to talk about. Whenever people say they want to kill themselves, again, as a school counselor, junior high kids, I heard it all the time. Sometimes people, when they don't think they're being heard, will use very extreme rhetoric just to be heard. And whenever a child or someone would tell me, I just want to kill myself, well, in a school setting, you don't you don't want to hear that, but okay, I get that. Have you thought about it? Things like that. You got to do some checking. But just because they say that, they don't want to do it. They just want to be heard. They just want to be understood. So you're trying to understand their experience. Reflect and clarify. Okay? So they say something to you, reflect it back. So what I hear you say is this. Okay, now am I understanding this right? And show them. I'm trying to understand. There's sometimes you'll say, okay, this is what I'm hearing you say. Is this right? Nope, that's not it. Okay, let's try it again. But help me to understand. Respect confidentiality. This is probably one of the big things that causes so many people not to carry their burdens to other people, is this. I've had, and maybe the elders here, people from other congregations call me and talk about their issues. And then I would say, well, why aren't you talking to your elders about this? I don't trust them. I'm afraid it'll get out. Now again, whether that's warranted or not, I don't know. But confidentiality is very important, and people need to understand that when they talk to you, that you're going to hold in confidence the things that they tell you. Again, unless they're extreme, they're a threat to themselves or they're a threat to other people or there is other real imminent danger. But to let them know they can say what they need to say. And you're going to guard that. And if you do need to disclose anything, you ask them, hey, I'm going to talk to so-and-so about this. Is it okay if I, to show respect? Make judgments at the appropriate time. Again, I said earlier about, listening to them without judging. There is an appropriate time for judgment. In Proverbs 25, verses 11 and 12, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver, like an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold is a wise rebuker to an obedient ear. A wise rebuker. Sometimes maybe I try to be too strategic in talking to people, and maybe I just need to be more blunt like others can be. But just timing is a lot of things, okay? If that person that tells me, and they're in the throes of their misery and they're expressing themselves and they say they hate God, that might not be the time to confront that, but to wait for another time. To be able to meet them with that objection and reason about that objection. But to understand that in a helping relationship, timing is important. That our speech is with grace, seasoned with salt. And again, understanding is not an endorsement of sinful actions. And then be inviting. Be an inviting person. Be a person that someone feels like they can come and talk to you. Whenever you look at Jesus in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30, he said, "Come unto me, all ye who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I know everything." Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, because I created the universe and I have all the power to do everything. What did he say? I'm meek and lowly in heart. I'm meek and lowly in heart. I can understand. I can understand. And by having that inviting personality, we can go with confidence and we'll find rest to our souls. because his yoke is easy and his burden is light. Whenever you look at this, and again, I didn't mean to give you a college course in counseling and listening, but I wanted to raise the awareness of the importance of being good listeners and connecting with people. Do feelings change truth? No. Do facts care about feelings? No. But people care about feelings. And it's whenever you connect to people's feelings that you show to them that you care. And when you show to them that you care, you become a credible comforter to them. And you're going to be able to help them and take them where they need to go in the truth. And so whenever we look at this, I hope we don't look at it as that's just some of that soft counseling stuff. You know, we're kind of in our tradition, you know, hey, let's make it black and white, let's cut the chase, let's get to where we need to get. Well, sometimes that takes some doing. It takes some patience. And we need to be willing to show that patience and to be that type of people. Look at these skills. Think about them. Again, practice them with one another. Again, practice them with your spouse. Husbands, do you really know how your wives feel? You know, as men, we're not women. No matter what anybody else says, we're not. And we can't be. So the only way I can know what it's like to be a woman is to listen to my wife. And to listen to her. And if she says something to me that, you know, well, I feel, you know, well, you shouldn't feel that way. No, that's not it. That's the way she feels. That's what I've got to work with. And I'm what she's got to work with. And just, again, you got to take people where they are. And people, believe it or not, feel different than you do about certain things. Reflect and clarify. Talk to parents. Talk to your children. Just try to enter their world for just a moment. You know, I know that you take a 15-year-old adolescent boy today and stick him in a public school, it's a completely different world than when I was a 15-year-old adolescent boy in a public school. And if we don't take the time to understand our kids, to listen to them and to understand what they're going through, whenever we speak to them, it's just going to be like words to the wind. Well, Mom and Dad, they don't understand. Mom and Dad don't understand. Take the time to understand them. Take the time to hurt with them. Among yourselves, speak with one another. Open up to one another. Share with one another. And don't try to focus on just fixing one another. Just try to understand one another and the world and the experiences that you come from, so that you can develop credibility with one another and become capable comforters to help and to understand each other. So I hope as we've looked at this evening that it will challenge you to listen to each other, to come together and to have that compassion that we are called to have in 1 Peter chapter 3. A compassion where we just don't feel for one another, but we feel with one another. A compassion to where we don't just look at one another and, okay, boy, I really hate that for you. I hope that gets better. It's, let me join with you. Let me cry with you. Let me laugh with you. Let me hurt with you. Let me experience what you're experiencing. And let's go through this together as we seek to move forward to realize the truth that God has about your situation to His glory and to His honor. If you're here tonight and you're not a Christian, Jesus understands you. Jesus understands. He left heaven and He came here to this earth to experience this world just for you, to give you confidence that He knows what you need. And that whenever He came to this earth, He came and He lived sinless to qualify Himself as the atonement for your sin, to go to the cross and to die as a sinner, so that you as a sinner can be righteous in Jesus. And the congregation here would invite you to make that wish known, to be able to be buried with the Lord in baptism. Or if you're here tonight and you are a Christian and you're carrying a burden and you want to share that burden with the people here and you want to open up and let other people suffer with you. You know, a lot of times we get it in our mind, well, I don't want to bother other people with my problems. You know what the Bible says? Bother people with your problems. Bother people with your problems. That's why we're all together. That's why we're all together. Whenever we obeyed the gospel, God did three things. Took away our sins, received the gift of the Holy Spirit, and He stuck us in a body of people. And why did He do that? Because He knew we would need a body of people in order to live the Christian life. So if you have a need and you want to make that need known now, please come to the front as we stand and sing the song selected.